Alright, so last time, I want to kind of review what we just kind of talked about last time, since it was about 2 months ago, so it's been a while. So if you recall, last time we talked about Autodesk University, kind of shared everything that happened there, talked a little bit about plotting to SDP3. There's no need to kind of unload the Mylar, just kind of talked some generalities about SDP3. Talked about some list routines. I showed you how to make all your page setups current. If you remember that, we have about 10 tabs in a drawing, and we can run this list routine to apply the current page setup to all the tabs. We also talked about making line types, that list routine, change space copy, and viewport outline. We also talked briefly about SDG&E underground tool updates with the part builder and blocks. We also talked a little bit about Civil 3D automation, kind of just verifying that the software is doing what you want it to do. Specifically, we talked about grading issues, and anytime you have a steep slope or a steep street, any corridor that you build off of that, you got to remember that all your parts are building perpendicular to your roadway. And so you can have some issues that it's not actually calculating a 2-to-1 slope. It actually comes out 1.8 to 1. And then also with pipe network parts, just kind of verify dimensions and stationing of centerline. Make sure that the software is returning the values that you expect and anticipate. We also talked a little bit about what happens when you explode feature lines, specifically when they have an arc as part of your feature line. And we talked a little bit about using a flattened site to kind of help aid in that. We learned a little bit about the offset gap type command. We also learned a shortcut on how to edit attributes within a block. If you hit Control and double click it, it will act like regular text. And then we talked a little bit about tips and tricks of Civil 3D in AutoCAD, how to disable Viewport Max, and also to do orthogonal panning using the Control button. Then we talked a little bit about SDG and underground conduit and trench repair subassemblies. So that's what we talked about 2 months ago. So that brings us up to today. All right. So as you all know, we have a new plotter. It's SDP2. If you haven't used it, feel free to use it now. It is set up and configured. Initially, it had some issues with rotating paper sizes, specifically a 24 by 36. That's been fixed now. If you go to it, you'll see new paper sizes. They're all called CAD underscore and then the page size. If you don't have a page size that you need, please let me know. The advantages of this plotter are B, you're going to have a lot better quality. Instead of just doing one black and then the 3 primary colors, it has a black, a matte black, and a gray as its ink cartridges. So any gray plotting is going to be a lot better on SDP2. If you haven't noticed, SDP3, the gray plotting has become pretty colored. It almost has a magenta hue to it. So you'll notice that, especially if you plot to the SDP2. The other advantage of SDP2 is that it has a top stacker tray, and so you don't have to gather your plots out from the basket. Or on the floor, or wherever they end up. They'll be all out of order, and you'll spend the next 10 minutes correlating them. Next thing I kind of want to talk about is just printing PDFs. This has always been kind of an issue, so I just kind of want to walk through it once and hopefully be done. So this guy's actually kind of set up correctly. No plotters. That's always great. So this is kind of set up correctly. The one thing that you want to make sure when plotting PDFs is that this box is not checked. Choose paper source by PDF page size. Uncheck that. That can cause a lot of issues with our plotters. It doesn't always pick the right page size, or it just won't plot, period. So how do you pick the page size? Right here, if you go down to page setup, that's where you guys need to pick your page size. So if we want to print to tabloid, that's where we would do it. So that's the whole key of plotting your PDFs. Make sure that that's unchecked, and then pick your actual page size using the page setup button. do not go to this properties window. Just don't do it. All right. You don't want to mess with the printers. Never mess with the printers. Always just pick your page size using page setup.
What about on both sides? It's the only place you can do it is going.
Good point. I'll let you do that.
Thank you.
All right. Next thing, we'll talk a little bit about branding NV5 and our logo. So in case you don't know, our details and title blocks and all that stuff is on the Q drive, CAD lib, and then SD detail library. You'll see a folder called title blocks. We'll go into one of these. We'll just go into this one, for instance. And what you'll notice, this is the NV5 title block now. It should just say NV5. It shouldn't say multi-vertical 5 or beyond engineering. It's just going to be NV5. So that's kind of the direction that the company has headed. Now this is the size that was dictated by SDG&E. So if you're working on SDG&E, yes, this is the size that they want our logo. If this is not an SDG plan, feel free to take some liberties in terms of the sizing of that. My opinion, our logo is too small in this title block. So these should be cleaned up too. I believe I cleaned them all up. And it's not a block inside a block. Before it was a block inside a block, and so it was very difficult to make changes. So now it's just one single block. It does have should have a dynamic property. I'm not seeing it. We won't worry about that though. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say about the logo. Is it's just NV5, no multi-vertical 5 or beyond engineering.
Is that still on the queue located?
Yeah. All right, the next thing, if we go up to create a file, you'll notice there's a couple new templates now. They're towards the bottom, all dealing with SDG&E. There's two for SDG&E Building 5, one for one line and one for sketch. This is if you're doing distribution design work. These are the two templates that you will need to use. They come predefined with all your layers and colors and line types set for that type of work. In the next month or so, we'll be working on developing all the appropriate blocks needed for that workflow, and those will be preloaded into those templates. So if you're working on distribution design, I don't see too many distribution design people here. That's where it is. Also talking distribution design, you guys have your own separate folder under the N drive, _SDG&E, distribution design, and this is where all your job folders are. So if you're ever working on an SDB 096-300 series job, this is where they're going to be. And this is pretty much just for those folks working in distribution design. The other template that you saw there was a SDG&E gas template. So we've started working on gas line work, and so, hey, let's develop a template. And soon we'll be developing a block library for gas work as well. So just kind of be aware of that for those that choose the SDG&E template. Yours is still at the bottom, but make sure that you're picking that one and not the gas or the Building 5 sketch or one line. Just want to talk a little bit about our NV5 file structure and making sure we adhere to company standards. The first thing I want to talk about is the EXTO. Think of the EXTO as the file that we receive from the Aerolist company. Should be used as XREF if you want to get the backgrounds into your drawings. No Civil 3D information should reside in your EXTO. That's what the EXTO-C3 file is for. Now the main reason why we don't want the two to mix is because almost every drawing you work on for your project, you're going to XREF in the EXTO. And if you have a bunch of Civil 3D objects, your EXTO file is going to grow rather large in size. And that's just going to slow down performance of every single drawing file that you're working on. So make sure that your EXTO is basic line work. Your EXTOC3, that will contain all your points from survey field information. It will also create your surface in your C3 file. That surface alone can almost double the size of your drawing file. So it's very important that we adhere to that distinction. In addition, make sure that you draw all your existing pipe networks in your EXUTC3 file. You want to be sure to do that so that you're not limiting what can be done in terms of your workflow and the number of people working on your file. If it's in your EXUTC3, you'll then data shortcut it into all your profile drawings and everything else that you need it for. File coordination.
Is that the same for PRTOC3? We can do that too?
In terms of
PRTO and PRTOC3?
Yes, there are going to be times where that's not necessarily the best workflow. I'd kind of like to talk about that on the side to kind of the civil group, because that's more of a civil group action item. But good question. Let's talk about that a little bit offline though. File coordination. A couple things I want to mention here is anytime you want to send a file to either a client or a consultant, be sure to do a save as and put it under the deliverable folder. Now there's a couple reasons for this. We want to modify the files that we send that get sent out from this office. First thing that we would want to do is kind of strip down our drawing and just send the basics. You know, all of our drawings are based off of our template, which have an abundance of styles and layers and other things that we don't necessarily want the consultants to even have, let alone clutter their drawings with. Anytime you receive a file, you want it as clean as possible. You don't want it to have 2,000 layers. You want it to be very simplistic. So on that saved as version of the drawing, there's a couple things that we're going to want to do. The first thing that we're going to want to do is hit this Manage on your ribbon and go over to Purge Styles. So this will purge all the styles in your drawing that are not used by objects. So doing that will eliminate quite a few styles. And then the next thing that you'll do is that you'll purge your drawing. Now that those unused styles are gone, you can delete any layer associated with those styles. So that'll clean up your drawing a ton, as well as it will protect NV5's intellectual property right of all those styles and blocks and everything else that has been developed here. So keep all that in mind. Yes, sir.
One of the things you also have to keep in mind is that not all of our consultants have civil preview. So for those consultants, they have to have proxy graphics on. And out of the box, AutoCAD comes with proxy graphics off. So a lot of consultants won't be able to see your data if they don't have the proxy graphic on. And once they do get it, they won't be able to use it or manipulate it. It becomes a block at that point.
And I was going to skip this step, but since you brought it up, Mark, and kind of touched on it, if you go up to the e-transmit, this is how you would send a whole slew of files. You know, you're not necessarily going to want to go to every single file in your drawing set and transfer them. So the e-transmit has some abilities preset in it for you. We kind of talked about this maybe four or 5 months ago, but everybody should have these transmittal setups predefined for you. And we should probably create a couple more. We should probably create a 2007 client. And we should probably do it with exploded AEC objects. So those AEC objects, those are kind of the intelligent objects. If we explode them, it'll just become dummy line work. It'll kind of get rid of some of that proxy image information, and it'll explode it just to line work. So kind of give those a look over if you haven't really played around with e-transmittal settings before. This is always good. One of the things you'll notice is do your clients a favor, set the default plotter to none, purge your drawings. It's up to you whether or not you want to include fonts. Most people don't really know how to manipulate the font files when they receive them, so that's not too big of a deal, and we don't really use any NV5 proprietary fonts, so you should be fine not including those. You do maybe want to include files from data links depending on who you're sending your files to. Ideally, you're going to want to explode all that information, so you don't really want to send them your data links.
How does any of this affect dynamic blocks?
Dynamic blocks?
Yeah, do they stay as dynamic or do they explode as well?
Dynamic blocks will stay dynamic. So if we do have a developed dynamic block and it's in use in the drawing, they'll have that still as a dynamic block.
It's only the AEC objects, you know, the stuff that gets created by Subassemblies. And the reason I brought it up was that, you know, some clients, they don't have it, and then they say, well, I don't see it in the drawing. And the reason they don't see it is because they don't have proxy graphics.
All right. Next thing, couple things in the update that you should be pretty happy about. Sometimes when you open a drawing, you'll get an error saying this drawing has a large number of annotative scales. Would you like to reset the number of scales? And you'll get that every time you open the drawing, regardless of whether or not you say yes, reset, or no. That is the biggest hindrance in terms of AutoCAD performance, is your annotative scales. So hopefully in this update, which you will get out today, the first thing you'll notice is if you go down to your annotative scales, this list has been reset. You no longer see 20 different scales. There were a bunch of architectural scales. I've actually gone through to the registry and edited it down to just these main civil scales. You can always add to this list. However, this is the list that we're going to start out with. So this will clean up your drawings significantly. Yes, Mark?
One favor, for structural, you still have to use, you know, architectural scales. So you might want to set a list for structural.
Okay. So next time when you actually hit yes, it will actually reset it to this list once you run the update. This has a huge drag on your performance of opening and working in files. So hopefully you guys will see some performance boost that is associated with that cleanup. Yeah. Next thing is polar tracking, which is right there. This guy here, F10. So we'll turn this guy on, and we'll just draw a simple line for now. And we'll go to rotate that line around that base point. Turn ortho off. And what you'll notice is that nothing really special happens. So let's type POLARANG. Currently set to 90 degrees. That's not very helpful. We kind of know where 90 is. Something that would be more useful is 11.25 or 22.5. We'll do 22.5. So now when we go to rotate this guy, and of course it doesn't want to do it. There we go. Oops, still didn't want to do it.
No, snap. It's in snap. Snapping.
Shouldn't have to.
Yeah. Just like you don't have to remove it.
All right, we'll have to revisit this one next time.
Awesome. It's actually in the settings. It's polar snap.
Polar snap? No polar snap command?
No, it's in the settings for polar snap.
Oh.
Advanced. Polar tracking.
There it is. Turned on. I don't know why it's like that though.
That sounded fun.
So now, it's still not quite, I don't know, if the settings in this drawing are probably off or something.
With a relative or absolute.
Was that it?
It's got to be an absolute.
That was absolute.
Yeah.
We did work on these and got them to work. What this would be used for, though, is if you wanted to rotate this guy, let's say you're working on some water lines and you wanted to work on your fitting angles, this would be an easy way of doing it, that it would snap to that 22.5, and then you could snap to the next one, 22.5. So it just might be useful to you guys, something to keep in mind. Polar tracking isn't really used too much that I see. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, that you do have some flexibility in terms of rotation angles using that polar snap functionality. Viewports. So this was a weird little thing that I got to experience twice in 2 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a polygonal viewport. Alright. Now what you'll notice is that anytime you create a polygonal viewport and select it, it'll say viewport, and then it will have a 1 behind it. It's because there's a polyline as well that's associated with that. You guys like to have selection cycling turned on. So we'll turn that on. Where is it?
It's on the end. Next one. Next one.
There it is. So what we'll do is we'll go in here, select the polyline. That wasn't supposed to happen. It's kind of good that it did.
That's what you wanted to do.
Alright, so what you'll notice is that I was able to delete that polyline, yet that viewport still exists. This becomes a big issue. I'm still in the viewport, but I can now I can't modify or select that viewport. So, word of caution, do not delete your polyline that's associated with your viewport. Otherwise, this happens and you cause headaches for other people.
I think you can solve that by hitting Control-A to select all, and it'll select that viewport. Then you can just do your normal shift selection to select everything. No?
This is the only way of returning that polyline and restoring your viewport. You could undo. Problem is, if you come into this file and you find the file like this, which is the case that it happened twice in this last month, user came in and this is the way the file was associated. You know, you can go in, you can see that there's a viewport. Mine wasn't locked, so I can zoom in and out. But let's say I needed to modify this viewport, or my cut sheet has changed. So the only way that I've found to get it back is to do VP max and then VP min, and it will create your viewport. So you now have your viewport back, and then what you would do is you could then draw a new polyline, say something like that. Because remember, we did want this to be a polygonal viewport. And then you could do a VP clip. So that would be a way of restoring your viewport back if you delete that polyline. However, I strongly encourage you to be very cautious and not delete that polyline. So that's kind of the workaround to bring it back. Don't delete that polyline. The reason why sometimes I think maybe you guys delete that polyline or that polyline gets deleted is because it's probably not on the right layer. You can create that polyline and the viewport on separate layers, but when you select it, it will only show one of those layers. So a lot of times that polyline will actually be, let's say, on 0 layer, and then it'll be plotting, and that's why users will come in here, select that polyline, and delete it, so that that polyline doesn't plot. But yeah, that would be the best thing to do, is when you draw that polyline, make sure you're on your VP layer, so that both your polyline and your viewport are drawn on that non-plottable layer. All right. All right, next thing. This will only affect some of you in this room, but it's always good to give the information to everybody, because you can always think of clever ways to use it. So since the last time we met, your subassemblies for curves have been completely reworked, and I mean completely reworked. What you'll notice is that you have NV5 custom San Diego regional standard curves, and you also have Caltrans curves as well. Now the thing that makes these pretty special is that all the dimensions for that standard are pre-built into these guys. So for instance, let's try this let's go to this guy. Just your G2 curve for San Diego regional standards. We'll select it and put it there. Now what you'll notice about this curve when I bring up the properties window is before you'd have 10 different parameters here that you could specify, or that you had to specify, and you'd have to kind of look at the standard and then figure out what these dimensions were. Sometimes like the default out of the box, it's dimension A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I always forget what they are. I don't even remember. So these new curves, everything's pre-built into it. So all your prompts are, is this going to be a type G or type H? So you'd either select, you have to type in which one you want. So the H one, it's a little different. All the dimensions of that curve subassembly change based on those predefined values. So that is very helpful. That should save a lot of time when you're dealing with curves. And so that goes for all the curves. They're very simplified in terms of your appearance, but once you get into them, you have all kinds of options and flexibility. So this is for an AC dike. So here you have your curb height that you specify. So let's say it was 6-inch type B curb. Oh, that looks a little funny, right? Well, the reason for that is because there is no 6-inch type B curb. So you'll notice some visual display issues with that. But there is a 6-inch type C. There's not a 6-inch type D. So you do kind of need to know the standards a little bit. There is an 8-inch type B. So, and then everything adjusts and displays correctly. So those are all reworked for you. If you work with curves, you'll really appreciate that. That saves a lot of hassle. There's going to be times where you do need something not quite up to standard. When you come to that situation, let's talk about it. But you can always go back to your default curves and work through these as well. But keep in mind, when you do these, you'll get back to all the standard dialog box, and you'll have to specify and look up all these dimensions. So that's why if you can use the standard curves, it's going to save you a lot of time and hassle in terms of creating some of these curves. If you do end up needing one, let's talk, and maybe we add it to our library. Right now it's just based off of the standards, no modifications whatsoever, but there's going to be times where, let's say you need a flat pan on your gutter, or you need some special cases where those types of curves may be useful. If so, we can add it to the detail library or to the library. It's not that challenging, but this is a good starting point for us as a company. The other thing I kind of want to mention on those is we do have some new people in this room, so I wanted to make sure everybody's aware. For those dealing with storm drain, no, it's actually trying to load all the blocks in the tool palette. This tool palette can be very useful. However, it can kind of take a minute or two to kind of regenerate once you switch tabs or add tabs to it. So just be aware of that, especially since it's pulling it through the network. It's got to find all these blocks that are associated with this tool palette. However, that tool palette can make the use of the blocks quite beneficial. So we'll give it a minute.
The only thing, you know, when using the AC dikes, a lot of times, you know, Jarrod and I discussed this, but the workflow is basically to put the same piece of pavement that you have for your main line, but just make another, you know, copy it over, make it flat, and just make it the width of the AC dike. So when you're, you know, doing your quantities, the quantities always extend to the back of the AC dike.
To demonstrate that, I'll open up this drawing. But while we're waiting for that, no, not responding. That's always good. Just trying to mirror your workflows.
You haven't gotten it yet.
haven't crashed yet. So what you'll notice with this tool palette is that there's stuff for storm drain, plan and profile blocks. So all the blocks that have been developed are in this tool palette, and you can just simply click what you want, and then click, and then there's your block. So you don't really have to hunt around for where these are stored in the network, or let's say you're not using a template, which you should be, or you're working in an old file that didn't start from the template, and so you don't have these preloaded. This is an easy way of inserting all that information into your drawing. And these are the dynamic blocks that have been developed. So you have storm drain, plan, and profile. And this is what I'm talking about. If you click on the next tab, it takes a minute to load because it's actually going to the resource library and loading all these dynamic blocks into the tab. So we've got those for storm drain, plan, and profile. We also have it for electrical underground work. We have all the vaults, manholes, and handholds in these two tabs. And they are dynamic, and they also insert on the right layer. So that block is actually on the right layer.
Doesn't matter what layer you're using.
Correct.
You might mention too, for those that aren't used to working with the dynamic blocks, he has a bunch of dimensions and things like that in there. They're all in the construction.
Correct. So like this one, you'll notice it has your height, your V depth. There's always two ways to manage the dimensions of a dynamic block. There's always the script, which is dynamic, or you can type in the elevation here. Just keep in mind that this is a 4 exaggeration block, so whatever value you want, you have to exaggerate by 4. So if we type 16, which divided by 4 is 4. So there's your height. So the dimensions are a part of every block. like Mark said, they're on a construction line layer that's no plottable. Same with all this information that's on construction layer, construction block information layer. It's non-plottable, but it's always good to know exactly what block you're dealing with and what the dimensions of that said block are.
So is this an example of something you don't want to get when sending a file out? The whole palette is not given, right?
No, any block that's in your drawing would be distributed, and I'm okay with that. We just want to try to limit what we give. I don't expect you to go through every file that you work on and explode all your blocks. That's an unrealistic expectation, but we do want to kind of monitor the stuff that we do send out and basically give to others. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're working on files and who you're giving it to. You know, it is kind of, most companies have a lot of things already developed, so they're not in the business of stealing what we're doing. But this was rampant in the industry, right when Civil 3D came out especially. I remember looking at other companies' files and going, hey, that's a pretty cool style. Thanks. You know, so, you know, we're you know, almost, we're 9 years, 10 years, this March will be 10 years that Civil 3D has been out on the market, so I'm not too concerned about our styles, but we have developed some pretty cool styles that I would like to retain in-house and not distribute to the world. So that goes with all our intellectual property rights. Just kind of just be aware of it. That's all I want, is you guys to be aware of it and make sure that you're not handing everybody the keys to the kingdom. All right, so those are the new subassemblies. Next thing I want to talk about is, and this drawing, oh, that's right, I wanted to get back to what Mark was mentioning. So what Mark was mentioning about the AC dike, this is kind of what, this is just a basic 4-inch AC over native. So this is your pavement section, and then what you need to do is you need to add a separate pavement section underneath your AC dike subassembly. So this is how it would actually get kind of constructed out in the field. So just kind of be aware of that when you use your AC dike, that you need to put your pavement section in it as well. All right. So this project is Hamashaw project, underground. So one of the things that got developed when I was working on this project is better structure, pipe network structure labels. Previously they were just very generic, didn't have much ability to adjust or do anything with them. If you tried to drag them, you really couldn't. You couldn't move them to the side. You're handicapped quite well. So for instance, we'll just go in here and we'll add pipe network label, and we'll change this to just a single part profile. And then let's see, I don't think we have the old one, but let's just do this one here. What's going on? Oh, just kidding. Alright, so there was kind of like your standard pipe network label, and you couldn't really do anything with it if you had labeling conflicts. If you tried to drag it, that would happen, and then you'd have to reset it, and then it resets there. So not very useful, right? So instead, I've developed this guy for you. So what we'll do is we'll add it, being sure to select your profile view first. Alright, so the first thing that you'll notice is this label looks like all your other labels on your plan, which are profile view labels. So this guy will now behave kind of similarly to your profile view labels in terms of you have some drag functionality. However, getting there is a little bit more complicated. Alright, So let's see if I can remember how to do this. First step is to drag it completely up north with your ortho. Leader tail visibility, you always want to hide that, which will bring it like that. And then the next thing you want to do is you have to pen your label. And you'll notice it has a nice little pen there. Once that pen is there, then we can start moving it around and adjusting it and adding vertices as we like. So that's how you take a pipe network structure label and make it customizable. All right. So this applies to a lot of things more than just underground. It applies to sewer, storm drain, maybe some water. So that's a very useful tool that's been developed. Right now, this style exists only in the SDG&E template. However, as I see the need and use of it in other disciplines and other groups, we can develop those styles to be whatever you want. The main reason why we need to kind of continue using pipe network labels instead of what our workaround was, let's use a profile view label and just put it at that point. Well, when you do it, do it that way, that label is no longer tied dynamically to your structure. If your structure changes, your label will not update. And secondly, we wanted to display some information that a profile view label couldn't. For instance, I don't know if I've got it developed in here. I don't think we do, because I think Doug wanted it off. But let's say we wanted to know the offset, structure offset from our center line of the structure. We can now do that because the functionality is there on a pipe network structure label. Profile view label obviously doesn't have any of that information because it's just picking a point on your profile. Versus a structure label, pipe network structure label, can actually read any information associated with the structure. We can add it into that label. So anything you see here, we can add to that label. So that's pretty helpful.
One of the things that makes that nice, if you're doing storm drain, not necessarily electrical work, storm drain work, and you have an alignment line for your storm drain, but you also want to reference the center line of the road, that can be done if you can reference the center.
Correct. So the main thing for this workflow was getting the structure offset. Well, if it's in this box, we can then add it to your label. So that was the reason for that kind of development. So like Mark said, kind of keep that in mind of we can have reference text to almost any entity that we want now. It doesn't just have to be a profile view label, which is only going to read your station and elevation and a couple other things, but those are major two things that your profile view label is able to read. So that's a pretty cool development, and that's how you manipulate those structure labels. All right, and then the last thing that I want to kind of go over.
On those labels have to have the pipe network in it to label those pipes?
Which one? This?
Yeah, those guys below there.
These guys? So the way that this works, this is using NV5 tools, and this is using the pipe network labeler, which is right here. So this is a profile pipe labeler. And what this actually is this is a little tricky because you think you're labeling the pipe network. You are, but you're not. You're labeling the pipe network, but you're actually using a profile view label to do it. So everything you see here, see what those styles look like? If I go to my tool space, I love working on this little screen. Those are the styles that you saw under that pipe profile labeler. They're actually profile view labels that you're creating. So if I click on this guy, you'll notice that this is actually profile view label based on the layer that it's on and also the styles that you're able to choose. These are all profile view labels, not pipe networks labels.
And to answer your next question, if the pipe network changes, then you have to move the profile view label because it's not attached.
So like this one, shame on us. This one actually, something moved here. So the way we would go about that, I guess I'll take responsibility for that since I worked on the profile. Under this profile, you can link and update labels. You can also do a bulk update labels and select everything. This one actually, that's a different story. Let's not talk about that. we don't want to go to that depth. But these, what you would have to, since these are only labeling the point, they're not actually dynamically tied to your pipe network. However, there is some connectivity and glue to them. You can, once this pipe moves, you can update these labels, and the information will reattach to that pipe.
But you do have to execute the update.
Correct. It's not dynamic. You have to run through the steps of actually telling it, hey, update all my labels. And when you do that, you'll need to do some drafting as well. It doesn't like it when you add that vertex and move it aside. So when this pipe moves, only this point will move. This will stay where it is, so you'll need to clean up some drafting. So just be aware of that, if you're changing your alignment or changing where these pipes are, you do need to go through and update your crossings, and then you'll need to do some drafting cleanup afterwards as well.
And hopefully it doesn't move like 40 feet.
But they can, so just be aware of that. All right, so the last thing, you guys hang with me. Just want to talk real quick about Sheetset and kind of walk everybody through using Sheetset rather quickly. We won't cover everything, but I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of some of the functionality with a Sheetset. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a new sheet. Let me back up. To bring up that dialog box, just type Sheetset. That's the easiest way to access it. It'll pop up. So we started this project, so we'll create a new Sheetset. We'll use the existing drawings and hit next. We'll give this the name. All right, I guess I'll just do this. And the most important thing is where you store this Sheetset. In my update, you'll notice that it defaults to the N drive. This is a very good thing. I have probably wasted 4 days of my life because somebody did not store the Sheetset in the correct location. Out of the box, the default is somewhere on your C drive. Well, that means only you can access that Sheetset. So be sure to store your Sheetset on the N drive under your job and where your files are located. All right. So for instance, if I was working with files under here, this is where I would store my Sheetset. So be sure that you store that correctly, because every drawing can only be associated with one Sheetset. And you have to physically go into that Sheetset and detach your drawings in order to attach it to a new or better Sheetset. So you can see if somebody saves that to their C drive and nobody else can access it, you're pretty much screwed. So be sure that you save your Sheetsets where your drawing files are located. All right, right now we'll just hit OK. Then we'll browse for the drawing. Since I don't want to actually affect any job or anything, I'm just going to come in here and add my template. All right. Since I didn't specify any folder, it'll add everything under this template folder. So we'll go through here and uncheck the things that we don't necessarily want to add. You know, something like that. And we'll hit OK. And these are all the drawing layouts, the each drawing and then the layout that's associated in that drawing. And then we'll hit finish. All right, and there they are. So what do we do with this sheet set? The first thing that we can do with this sheet set is we can plot our entire plan set in a couple clicks. I always go to the dialog box option, and then here you can, has everybody seen this? Has anybody not seen this? Good, then we'll skip it. So that's your one advantage of Sheetset, used to plot plans. However, that's just the beginning of Sheetset. So typically, what do we do with our title blocks? We'll have our current sheet number in here. Wouldn't it be nice if we never had to edit that piece of text or that block? Well, let's make it so that we don't ever have to do that. Especially when you have a 150 plan sheet set or 180, and then you add a sheet in your middle, and then you'd have to open every sheet and change every single current sheet. Right? So let's think of a clever way to get around that. The clever way is to create a field. So you can just type field, and then what you'll see in here is you have all kinds of different options in terms of what you want to create it to. What we want to do is we want to create a field using the current sheet number, and that current sheet number is from your sheet set. So then we could hit OK, and we'll place it. I don't know where it went, but so there it is. So there's your field, and this is going to update and take whatever sheet is being identified in your sheet set. So then if I save this and reopen it and it was a part, it would populate, and it would change based on however I manipulate my sheet set. So now instead of manipulating this piece of text in however many files and layout tabs that you have, well, 150 layout tabs, you know how slow it is switching from layout tab to layout tab. That's the last thing you want to spend your afternoon doing, right? Instead, now using that field, we can just edit it using our sheet set. So let's say we added sheet 12 in here and we needed to renumber all of our sheets. All we'd have to do is go rename and renumber. So 11 becomes 12, hit next, 12 becomes 13, 13 becomes 14, etc., etc. Something's not happy. Probably because I have multiple things in here named the same thing. But that's all you would have to do, and then all this text would update because it's reading these values.
Padma took it one step further. She actually had match lines reference that said +1, -1.
Yeah, you definitely do that.
Took care of all the match lines and took care of every reference that we did.
You can add custom properties into these fields as on the ones that Jarrod just showed. And then you can add, this is the begin station for that particular sheet and the end station. And then when that changes, it gets automatically updated.
Which it did.
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
So the use of fields, that's kind of what I want to touch on, is, Sheetset is just the beginning. It's the gateway to being able to do a lot of animated processes. So that's kind of our time, but I wanted to kind of open that door and kind of bring that kind of line of thought of you can use this more than just for plotting.
And it's wonderful.
It's wonderful for plotting, don't get me wrong. It will save you hours in your day, but it's the gateway drug to real excitement.
Well, we inserted a sheet in that 180 set sheet. She took care of changing all of that in about, 20 minutes?
20 minutes, because you just have to go and just redo the numbers in the sheet set, not go and touch it. Going back
so that probably saved you, what, like 2 days of drafting?
Yeah.
So we're talking very significant time and production savings here. Go ahead, Pat.
Going back to the plotting, I'm sorry. Going back to plotting, you can actually also do e-transmit for the whole job. if you're actually sending a full set to the client, you can just go click on that e-transmit. It picks up all the maps or everything, and then you can put it in one folder or zip it and then send it.
And this also makes it easy for you to archive your files, something that you guys should be doing probably more regularly than what I've seen here. Creating full backups of your job files before major changes. A lot of your changes, they all start in your master drawing, and then they affect your plan and profile. They affect your plan sheets, and it affects everything. It affects 30 different files spread over 4 different file locations. This is a very easy way of backing up and archiving those files. Is just to go to your plan set, create an e-transmit. You just grab every file that you're using in your plan set, and you have an archived copy of it now. Or if you need to send your plans to a client, or mostly to client, this is an easy way of doing it, and you have every file that's associated with this plan set done.
We do that for the county, because county requires e-transmit every single.
So sheet sets, they'll save you days.
This is what comes up to having a good project setup. Getting your project set up initially. Those first set of plans, those first tricks and tips, and getting everything established in the beginning so you're not sitting in the middle of a set and then have to rework it.
Yep.
And it does take some time to set up all the fields and everything in the beginning.
Correct.
If you take the time to do that, it makes your job easier, especially if it's a really big job like one of those was.
And
It takes a lot of time.
keep in mind that we can add those fields to our standard title blocks, or our, the same block that we insert all of our attributes. We can incorporate fields into those, and instead of using those block attributes, use these fields.
So do you put the attributes in the XREF or into an insert? You can XREF or insert. Now, do those fields work when you XREF, or do they only work when you insert?
They would need to be inserted into your drawing sheet, but you're doing that with your block attributes anyway. You're inserting those into each sheet, so it's no different than what you're currently doing in your workflows.
An insert when you do that. But the other thing that helps, especially if you do like the sheet name and things like that. Client calls up and says, we don't want it to be called Melrose Drive Improvements. We want it to be called Melrose Drive Link. Okay. Every single reference to Melrose Drive extension had to be changed.
Block attributes are kind of a thing of the past. They used to be very useful, but when you're inserting that block into every tab, that requires you to go to every tab unless you start doing some global attribute changes, which we can do, but there's instances where you don't necessarily want it to be totally global. But keep in mind that if you do come into situations like that, let's try to introduce fields into our workflow, but I understand we've got hundreds of jobs that are current and are kind of using block attributes and old way of doing things. We can still make strides in being efficient on that old way of doing things. One instance was Kenny had some revisions in the attributes of our title block, but those attributes were in 150 different tabs. Well, we can write a list routine that will wipe them all out, or that will change them all. So rather than spending a day drafting, let's think of a clever way of finding the better solution.
And it takes only a few, maybe an hour or so to come up with that list routine, or tweak the list routine you already have, and make it work.
Yep. So the goal is to eliminate the mindless days of drafting and make the computer work for you. And fields are one way of doing that. Any questions? Any more questions, I should say.
Thanks, Jarrod.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Where is it?